Hello everybody and welcome back to Farmhouse Lilies. My name is Brooke and today we are making 4 new recipes because I got a new mixer and I really want to play around with it. So the first thing we're going to be making today is vanilla wafers. This recipe is from the baker upstairs, so if you want any of these recipes I'll tell you who they're from and I'll link them down below. But this one's from the baker upstairs and I'm super excited about this one because I love vanilla wafers and they can just be used for so many different things, so let's get started.
Alright, let me introduce you to my new Ankarsrum mixer. This is a super exciting and delightful addition to the kitchen. I've been eyeing it for a little while and my husband bought it. It was the perfect opportunity to treat me for our anniversary and he took it. And I am so grateful that he decided to give this to me because it has been so fun to experiment with in the kitchen.
So to this mixer we added 4 tablespoons of softened butter, half a cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, an egg, 1 cup of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and half a teaspoon of salt. So we're going to pat this into a shape, cover it in plastic wrap, let it chill for 20 to 30 minutes, and then we're going to get it out and cook it for 15 to 17 minutes until you get that nice golden brown vanilla wafery color, which I love. So I'm super excited about this recipe. The oven is warming up now, so we're going to get this going. Okay, to this mixer we are adding 1 cup of softened butter, that's egg, and 3/4 a cup of cocoa powder. I am using a medium Dutch processed cocoa powder because I have had this for a little while and it needs to be used. One day John and I went to the local kitchen store that we have and they just have a ton of different cocoa powders, and we bought a few of them to test them out, and we were really impressed by some of them and not so impressed by others, and so we are just going to start using this up in some yummy cookies. And I forgot to tell you which cookie recipe we're doing. So the cookie recipe we're doing right now is Chewy Chocolate Toffee Cookies by Stephanie Brubaker. And these are super fudgy and chewy and loaded with chocolate chips and toffee bits, so we're super excited about this recipe. And we're going to add 2 cups of flour, and then we're going to get this on the mixer. So to the bowl we then added half a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, a teaspoon of baking powder, 2 eggs, 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1.5 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips, and 1.5 cups of Heath toffee bits. So we've got all that ready to go in our cookie form, and they said put it in 3 tablespoon scoops, so I have one of my larger small cookie scoops, if that makes sense, and we are just going to put these on the cookie sheet and get them ready to bake.
So back to the mixer. This has been super fun to experiment with and to play around with. It's just been such a fun addition to the kitchen, and I've been having a lot of fun playing with its limits. Not that I've really meant to play with its limits, but it's kind of happened, especially with this cookie dough, with it being so thick and crazy, because I know that my other mixer would not have been able to handle it, and so I'm impressed that the Ankarsrum was able to handle all of that mixing craziness. But I've had a lot of fun. Later on we're going to make a Pavlova and make a meringue with it, and so it was really fun to see how fast the Ankarsrum can make that meringue and really whip that up really nicely. And it's just a really fun mixer. I'm still playing around with it and still deciding how I feel about it, but I definitely am not negative about it at all. I think it's going to be a super great mixer to have for the next 40 years. I think it's going to be awesome.
These cookies don't look quite done yet, so we'll keep them in for another couple minutes. The recipe only said to put them in for 7 minutes, and I had a feeling that that would be not enough, so we're just gonna cook them for a little bit longer. All right, put these in for an extra 3 minutes, and they're looking a lot better. So we'll probably put them in for 10 to 11 minutes each.
These cookies were probably the most successful recipe out of the whole day. They didn't require any finagling of any sort, and they were super easy to put together. The only thing is, I noticed that when you put the first batch of cookies on the cold pan, they don't spread out much. But when you put the second batch of cookies on the warm pan, they do spread out more. So keep that in mind when you're making your cookies. But these were such a success. Everyone loves them. My husband loves it and is chewing on them all the time. So that's been super fun. And this is a really, really great recipe, especially to use up all those toffee bits I had in the pan.
While we're waiting for the cookies to bake, we're gonna go ahead and get started on our plum cherry scones. Plum cherry scones? Just plum scones. The recipe is for cherry scones, but we're gonna do plum scones. So this recipe is from Molly LaFontaine, and we're just going to change her recipe. So in the food processor, I have 2 cups of flour, 2/3 cup of cane sugar, half a teaspoon of salt. Actually, I didn't put salt in there, so we're gonna put half a teaspoon of salt. I put in 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and now we're gonna grate in with the grater attachment the cold butter. The recipe calls for 7 tablespoons. I have 8, 2 full sticks of butter, so we'll just see how this goes.
This recipe produced some really awesome tasting scones. The only thing is that the scones spread a little bit like cookies in the oven and didn't really hold their shape too well. They kind of held their shape a little bit, but not great. But I think that could be improved with a little bit more flour. I think is really all these need, because these taste amazing and I am craving them right now. Holy cow, they're so good. The plum is a nice addition, and I can see myself adding tons of fruits to these scones throughout the year, especially as they come into season.
So with everything that went in there, we have about a tablespoon of butter left, so that's perfect. We're just gonna set that aside. We're gonna take off our cheese grater attachment. So to this mixture now, we're going to add a half a cup of milk, a half a cup of sourdough starter, half a cup of milk, and I'm using sourdough discard because we don't need to rise anything in this recipe, and because it's a little bit stronger of a sourdough flavor, and that's what I want. Is I love sourdough flavor. Add an egg and some vanilla. And we're just gonna add as much vanilla as we want, because I love vanilla. So now we're just going to cover this and blend it. So once again, that was half a cup of milk, half a cup of sourdough starter. We used discard. That's the cookies. We did pure vanilla extract. It calls for half a teaspoon, but we did a tablespoon. An egg, and then we will add the plums afterwards. So now we have a sticky tacky dough, which the recipe said it would be sticky tacky, especially with the addition of the plums or the cherries, whichever you decide to do. So I will cut up the plums, put this in the fridge, cut up the plums, and then we'll mix it in the dough in a minute.
I can see how cherry would be such a good addition to this scone, but I have to say the plums were a really, really good choice. They are tart and delicious and just a little bit of sweet, and when they warm up and they cook a little bit, they're just perfect softness. They really were delicious in this recipe, but I could see myself adding apricots and peaches and other plums. There's a lot of different variety of plums that we have access to in the fruit stands here where we live. So I could see myself experimenting with those and putting all kinds of different goodies in here. The only thing, like I said, I would just add more flour. I think that's the only thing that I would really do differently with this recipe. But it's super good, and it maybe I could have made it in the Ankarsrum. I'm not really sure. I definitely wouldn't have wanted to cut the cold butter with the mixer, but I could see myself like mixing everything else in the mixer once the butter is cut in there. But the food processor was a good way to go with that as well. So I think you could pick and choose whatever you wanted to do with your stand mixer or your what's it called? Food processor. Sometimes word finding is difficult. Have you guys ever noticed that? I've noticed that.
Okay, so now we are going to mix these plums into this batter. I have 1 1/4 cup, I believe, of plums, and we're just gonna mix this together. Whoops. Now we are going to chill it for about 20 minutes before we shape it and bake it. Okay, now we finally have this vanilla wafer dough chilled. We are going to scoop it, roll it, and put it on our sheet pans and get it ready for baking. Then we'll bake it for, I think it was 15 to 17 minutes, and they'll get nice and golden brown and delicious, and we will send them off. Okay, our scone dough has been chilling for 20 minutes, so now we're going to flour our working surface, our countertop, and we're going to shape our scone dough, and then we'll cut it and bake it.
I love doing marathon baking days. Well, I love doing lots of baking every day too. So I can't say that marathon baking days make a big difference, but do you guys love marathon baking days? Because I think they are so fun. Yes, there's a lot of dishes and it does take a lot of energy, but I think it's so fun to cook all day and bake all day, and it's just one of the great joys in life, I think, is to cook and bake. Now, cleaning, on the other hand, is not something that I enjoy all the time, but I do it. You know, I have my cleaning day once a week, yeah, back to baking and cooking. I love baking and cooking.
So we're just going to form our scone dough into a circle and cut it into 8 slices like a pie. And then we'll put it on our baking sheet. And get them baking.
I bake and cook all day, and then it comes to dinner and you're like, oh, well, I've baked and cooked all day, but I didn't do dinner, so let's go out to eat, or let's do something fast. Like I did that today doing this video, right? And my husband came home and I was like, well, it's a good thing I planned for pizza today because I don't really feel like doing anything else. So we did our sourdough discard pizza crust and made pizza out of that, and it was absolutely delicious. So we are super happy with that. But marathon baking days, I think, are just a joy, especially when you can get friends involved and you can have family or friends and just have a good day. Sometimes it's just fun to be in the kitchen.
Okay guys, I'm not impressed by these cookies. We'll see how they do when they cool off and we get to taste them, but right now this recipe doesn't look like a winner. Okay, I just tasted this cookie and I'm really not impressed. If you wanted to call them lace cookies or something like that, then maybe. But these are supposed to be vanilla wafers and they're not vanilla wafers, so I'm not super impressed. Now, the chocolate cookies, on the other hand, are divine and heavenly and super delicious, and I definitely recommend that recipe to anyone. They're super good. They're gonna go on a plate to go to a friend as like a little gift. And so we're just gonna get that ready and finish these scones off. The scones are in the oven right now, and we'll add some scones to their plate And so they'll basically just have scones and chocolate cookies, and then we're gonna send that off to them. And then I'm gonna do some little on the town stuff, in the town stuff, and we are going to come back and make Pavlovas later. So I'm not super impressed by the scone recipe either, and it could definitely be user error. The scones are kind of melting in place, which is not super great. So it could be user error. I could have just needed to add more flour. It kind of feels like it, but the recipe did say that it was going to be a very wet scone dough. So I don't know, I'll probably have to experiment with it a little bit more and we'll see. So I'm just gonna take these plate of chocolate cookies to my friend, and she and her kids are just gonna love these. So we'll do that, and then we'll come back and do our Pavlovas later. So they've melted a little bit, but they've kept their shape really well. So I'm thinking maybe I will include some of these for my friends once they cool down. Okay, we are now back from our little adventure, and now we are going to make our Pavlovas. So for this, I'm going to whip meringue in my mixer. One thing to remember with meringues is that they're super sensitive to fats. So you want to make sure that all of your equipment is super clean, and wipe it down with vinegar to make sure that all those fats are off those surfaces so that your meringue really comes together. So right now I've got 4 egg whites in the mixer. I'm going to turn them on and start whipping my egg whites, and then we're going to slowly stream in 3/4 cup of sugar.
But a trick to get around not feeling like you're wanting to do anything after a big marathon cooking baking day is to meal prep ahead of time. Or have something easy that you can just throw in the crock pot or the Instant Pot and just have ready to go when you guys are ready. That is a big tip that I have, because it just takes the work out of making dinner once you've already been in the kitchen all day, which is great. That's exactly what you want to do, because at the end of the day you're done and you don't want to have to do one more big hurrah, essentially. And so it's nice to have something either super fast or something that has been going all day that will be ready when you are ready. So that is a tip to get around that and to have a good day.
Our egg whites have now been whipped to stiff peaks, so now we're going to transfer the meringue into a bowl so I can easier fold some of the last ingredients into the meringue. So we are now going to fold some lemon juice and vanilla extract into the mix. And it's going to be 1 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, and we are going to gently fold that into the meringue. You have to be really gentle with meringue. Now we are going to put in our 1 teaspoon of cornstarch and 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. So 1 teaspoon of cornstarch and 1/2 teaspoon cream of tartar. And now we're going to fold those in. Okay, and that is all folded in there. So now we are going to pipe our Pavlovas. What I have here is a Wilton 12 tip because that's what I have. The recipe suggests a 2D tip, about 2 inches in size. I don't have that, so I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so these Pavlovas need to be about 2 inches large.
These Pavlovas are so cute and so yummy. I probably should have cooked them a little bit longer. The tray on the upper rack was just a little chewy, but the tray on the lower rack ended up being perfect and like little meringue cookies, and it was delicious. So definitely not a waste, definitely something I would do again. I would just cook them for longer, which is hard to figure out how much longer to cook them for because you let them
Now
sit
these go into the oven for an hour and a half.
Questions.
Plus 30 minutes.
But
so it's an hour and a half of baking at 215, and then you turn the oven off and you let it rest for another half an hour without opening the oven door. It is now the moment of truth. We are going to take these Pavlovas out of the oven and taste test them. Okay, the ones on the bottom shelf turned out a little brown, which is expected because I expect that from my oven. That's totally normal. But these top ones are nice. Delicious. Kind of like a cloud. And they have a really nice vanilla flavor. Thank you for joining me today on my cooking adventures. The toffee chocolate cookies, the Pavlovas, and the scones were definitely a hit, so I definitely recommend those, just with some added flour in the scones maybe. Check your dough out before you cook them. And I'll link those recipes down below in the description, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.